Before we begin our relaxing journey through the ancient marvels of engineering, do me a small favor. If you're enjoying this type of content, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments what time it is and where you're listening from. Whether it's midnight in New York or 3 a.m. in Tokyo, we love hearing from you. Your engagement helps us create more videos to help you unwind, relax, and fall asleep to stories that enlighten. Now, let's drift back in time to a world where empires rose not just with the sword, but with stone, bronze, and ingenuity. What if the greatest engineering feats in history could actually help you fall asleep? Forget counting sheep. Tonight, we're diving deep into the colossal wonders of antiquity, from the Hanging Gardens of Babylon to the Great Wall of China. Discover the forgotten brilliance that shaped our world and let their legacy carry you to dreamland. Long before skyscrapers pierced the skies and machines reshaped cities, there was a time when humanity first dared to mold the earth with purpose, to craft not only shelter, but civilization. Our story begins over 6,000 years ago in the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia. Nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Mesopotamia was not just fertile ground for agriculture, it was fertile ground for ideas. Here, amid the alluvial plains of present-day Iraq, the Sumerians laid the foundation, literally and figuratively, for what would become the architectural and engineering legacy of humankind. They built with mud brick, a simple yet ingenious material. In a world with no stone and little wood, they discovered that clay from the rivers, shaped and sun-dried, could be layered into walls strong enough to stand for centuries. Their homes, temples, and even palaces rose from the same soil they walked upon. But it was the ziggurat that became the hallmark of their vision. These were not just religious temples. They were monumental feats of early engineering. Massive stepped structures rising like mountains in a flat land. The most famous, the Great Ziggurat of Ur, stood around 100 feet tall, built over multiple terraces. Imagine hauling thousands of mud bricks, each weighing 15 to 20 pounds, layer upon layer, without cranes, without machines, guided only by human labor and ingenuity. These structures were oriented to the cardinal points, aligned with the heavens. The Sumerians had already begun merging astronomy with architecture. They built irrigation canals that extended for miles, turning deserts into farmland. With rudimentary tools, they designed levees, sluices, and weirs, early hydraulic systems that laid the groundwork for water management. It was here that the wheel was first used for transport, not just pottery. A simple circular idea that would power millennia of advancement. As you relax and let your mind drift, imagine the sounds of ancient Ur, the rhythmic clatter of bricklayers stacking walls, the murmur of priests climbing the ziggurat steps, the soft trickle of canal water flowing through fields. This was the first heartbeat of human engineering. the Egyptians and the geometry of eternity. From the lands of rivers to the kingdom of the Nile, we drift next to Egypt. Here, in the shadow of pyramids, engineering was not just a skill, it was sacred. Egyptian engineering was driven by a singular obsession: eternity. Their monuments were not designed for the living, but for the afterlife. The pyramids of Giza remain the most awe-inspiring symbols of ancient ambition. The Great Pyramid, built around 25 and 60 BCE, stands nearly 500 feet tall. For over 3,800 years, it was the tallest man-made structure on Earth, and it was built without iron tools, without the wheel, just levers, ropes, copper chisels, and an unrelenting vision. How did they do it? Theories abound. Massive ramps, internal spirals, counterweights, but no definitive answer remains. What we do know is that their mathematics was precise. The sides of the Great Pyramid align almost perfectly with the cardinal directions. Its base is nearly square to within fractions of an inch. The internal chambers, ventilated with star-aligned shafts, show a sophistication that defies time. They understood geometry, weight distribution, and material physics long before such terms existed. Limestone for the outer casing, granite for the inner sanctum, materials chosen for both strength and symbolism. Beyond pyramids, the Egyptians engineered canals, dikes, and the earliest known dams. They mapped the stars, measured land after the Nile's floods, and created the 365-day calendar to regulate agricultural and ritual life. The temples of Karnak, Luxor, and Abu Simbel reveal mastery in stone. Massive columns carved with precision, aligned with solstices. Statues weighing hundreds of tons, transported miles without wheels. And still, these monuments stand. As you exhale, think of the calm along the Nile at dusk, the soft chants of workers returning home, the glow of torchlight against sandstone, the quiet persistence of a people who built not for today, but for forever. Part 3. The Indus Valley. Civilization, quiet innovators. Farther east, in what is now Pakistan and northwest India, lay the cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. Around 2500 BCE, a civilization flourished with little fanfare, yet with extraordinary design. The Indus Valley civilization may not have left towering monuments, but its engineering was perhaps even more advanced in one crucial aspect: urban planning. Mohenjo-Daro, one of its major cities, reveals a grid-based layout that wouldn't be seen again until Roman times. Streets intersected at right angles. Buildings were uniform. Homes had access to wells, and even more impressively, to indoor drainage systems. That's right, over 4,000 years ago, residents of the Indus Valley had indoor toilets that drained into a sophisticated network of sewers beneath the city. These channels had inspection covers, silt traps, and gradient flow, all principles still used today. Public baths, granaries with ventilation shafts, standardized bricks, baked at high temperature. This was a civilization that prized order, cleanliness, and community well-being. No kings, no palaces, no ziggurats, just peaceful, organized urban life. Let your mind rest in the symmetry of these ancient avenues. Picture the quiet sound of sandals on baked bricks, the splash of water drawn from a communal well, the hum of a society that solved everyday problems with care and craft. From the orderly lanes of the Indus Valley, we sail westward across the Aegean Sea into the land of myths and marble. Ancient Greece was a world where philosophy and engineering danced together, where logic shaped both arguments and architecture. Greek engineering was driven not just by necessity, but by the pursuit of beauty, proportion, and harmony. Their greatest achievement, the use of mathematics to sculpt perfection. The Parthenon, crowning the Acropolis of Athens, is more than a temple. It's a geometric masterpiece. Though it appears perfectly straight and symmetrical, nearly every line is curved. The columns bulge slightly in the middle, a technique called terraces, to correct optical illusions and make the structure appear even more flawless to the human eye. They understood that the human brain does not perceive lines in isolation, it interprets in context. So the Greeks engineered perception itself. Their temples were aligned with celestial events. Their theatres, like the one at Epidaurus, were engineered with acoustic perfection, allowing a whisper on stage to reach the back row. But the Greeks were not just architects, they were inventors. Archimedes, the genius of Syracuse, developed the Archimedean screw to lift water from low land, still used in parts of the world today. He figured out levers, pulleys, and buoyancy, and laid the foundations of engineering physics. Heron of Alexandria, centuries later, built primitive steam engines, automatic doors, and coin-operated machines. Ingenious contraptions, centuries ahead of their time. As your eyes grow heavier, picture the sunlight glinting off white marble, the echo of sandals across amphitheaters, and the slow turning of a bronze gear as a water screw hums beside an olive grove. The Greeks engineered not just stone, but the idea of progress. No civilization embodied engineering on
the grand scale, quite like Rome. To be Roman was to build aqueducts, roads, bridges, walls. Rome stamped its will into stone and earth. Wherever the empire expanded, it brought infrastructure, from Britannia to Egypt, from the Rhine to the Euphrates. Roman engineers laid down roads so precise that many still form the foundations of modern highways. Their crowning glory was concrete. Roman concrete, or opus cementitium, was a marvel, far more durable than modern mixes. Structures like the Pantheon, with its unreinforced concrete dome, still the largest in the world, remain standing after 2,000 years. How? The secret lies in their mixture. Volcanic ash from Pozzuoli near Naples was key, creating a chemical reaction with seawater that only made the concrete stronger over time. And then there are the arches, simple in shape, revolutionary in effect. The arch allowed Roman engineers to span vast distances and support massive loads. Combine arches and you get the vault. Rotate an arch and you get a dome. With these tools, Romans built aqueducts that delivered water over mountains and valleys. The Aqua Claudia stretched over 40 miles, delivering pure water to 1 million people. Roman baths, some as large as modern stadiums, required precise plumbing, heating, and airflow. Their engineers invented valves, siphons, and even pressure regulators. Public latrines flushed with flowing water. Fountains danced in courtyards. Imagine walking the cobbled Via Appia under a Roman sunrise. Water trickling from an aqueduct into a cistern. The clang of blacksmiths in a forum. The quiet grandeur of the Pantheon dome above you. A temple not just to gods, but to the genius of human hands. China. Innovation in harmony with nature. Across the world, a parallel legacy was unfolding. In ancient China, engineering advanced not through conquering nature, but harmonizing with it. Chinese engineers pioneered the use of standardized parts long before the Industrial Revolution. They built flood control systems, canals, bridges, and city walls with astonishing foresight. One of the most staggering feats was the Dujiangyan irrigation system, built in the 3rd century BCE. Without a single dam, it controlled the floods of the Min River, irrigated vast tracts of land, and still functions today. Instead of blocking the river, it gently redirected its flow, a masterpiece of ecological balance. The Great Wall of China, often seen as a symbol of isolation, was in fact a vast logistical and engineering endeavor. Spanning thousands of miles, built over centuries, it required coordination of materials, manpower, and topography across deserts, mountains, and plains. Some sections were made of tamped earth, others of stone, but all were anchored in modularity and consistency. The Chinese were also early pioneers of seismology. In the 2nd century CE, Zhang Heng created a device that could detect earthquakes hundreds of miles away, centuries before Europe had any such capability. As you rest your eyes, imagine the hush of pine forests along the Great Wall, the soft trickle of water through a bamboo sluice. the peaceful harmony of form, function, and nature, crafted by engineers who listened as much as they built. Far across the oceans, deep in the jungles of Mesoamerica, a civilization rose not with iron or wheels, but with vision, cosmic vision. The Maya were engineers of both stone and time. Their cities, Tikal, Palenque, Copan, rose from dense rainforest like islands of civilization, with no metal tools, beasts of burden, or draft animals. They built using only human strength and ingenuity. Their pyramids, like the towering temple of the great jaguar in Tikal, stood as both tomb and timekeeper. The Maya engineered their cities in accordance with the movements of celestial bodies. Their pyramids aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and planetary cycles. They observed Venus, tracked solar eclipses, and encoded this knowledge into calendar systems of astonishing accuracy. The El Castillo Pyramid in Chichen Itza, for instance, is a solar marvel. On the spring and autumn equinoxes, sunlight casts a shadow down the pyramid's stairway, forming the shape of a serpent, a living symbol of the feathered god Kukulkan. They engineered with limestone, using corbel arches, plaster coatings, and underground cisterns to collect rainwater, essential in regions with few natural rivers. Their Sakbeob, or white roads, connected cities with straight, elevated paths through jungle and swamp. Even their ball courts were architectural feats, designed with angled walls and acoustic properties that carried sound across vast stone spaces. As you breathe deeply, picture the golden sunlight drifting through vines over mossy temples, the echo of a priest's chant across a limestone plaza, the hush of sacred time winding through jungle stone. Persia, water, wind, and empires. To the east, in the harsh deserts of Iran, the Persian Empire thrived, not by defying the land, but by bending it to their will with grace and innovation. The Persians perfected one of the most remarkable hydraulic engineering systems of the ancient world, the Qanat. This underground aqueduct, sloping gently from mountain aquifers to arid plains, delivered fresh water across miles of dry terrain. Entire cities, fields, and caravanserais were sustained by these unseen rivers. Even today, some Qanats still function, quietly nourishing life beneath the surface. In cities like Yazd, engineers harnessed wind. They built badgers, or wind catchers, tall chimneys with internal vanes that directed cool air into homes while exhausting warm air. These were early air conditioners, designed for the harshest climates. Persian gardens, too, were feats of balance. Geometric symmetry, running water, and shaded paths formed paradise on earth, the inspiration for the word paradise itself. Their roads, paved, wide, and connected by rest stops, stretched thousands of miles across the empire. The Royal Road, built under Darius the Great, allowed couriers to cross 1,600 miles in mere days. As you settle deeper into rest, picture the slow gurgle of water beneath earth, the hush of cool air sweeping through clay corridors, and the golden shimmer of a distant caravan crossing the Zagros hills. Angkor and the hydraulic civilization of the Khmer. In the dense rainforests of Cambodia, a civilization emerged that thought not only in stone, but in water. The Khmer Empire, centered around Angkor, was one of the largest pre-industrial urban centers in the world. But its greatness lay not just in temples, but in its hydraulic engineering. The Khmer harnessed monsoon rains with vast reservoirs or barrays, some stretching several kilometers long. These lakes collected and stored seasonal rains, regulating flood and drought. From the barrays, a network of canals, sluices, and moats fed water to rice paddies and city neighborhoods. This system enabled year-round agriculture, sustaining a population in the hundreds of thousands. And at the center stood Angkor Wat, the largest religious monument on earth. Not just a temple, but a cosmological diagram carved into stone. It mirrors the Hindu universe. 5 central towers represent Mount Meru, its surrounding walls, the mountains, the moat, the cosmic ocean. Built in the 12th century, Angkor Wat's construction involved massive sandstone blocks quarried dozens of miles away, transported by raft and elephant, and assembled with exquisite precision. The Khmer even engineered roads through jungle, causeways with stone bridges and corbelled arches that stood for centuries. Imagine twilight settling over Angkor, the last light flickering off lotus ponds, the quiet lapping of water beneath temple steps, the forgotten rhythm of a civilization that channeled chaos into serenity. Engineering as legacy. As we reach the final stretch of this ancient journey, one truth lingers. Engineering is not just stone and mortar, it is a form of memory. Each wall, canal, dome, and device tells us how humans once saw the world, how they reached beyond survival to create meaning, comfort, and wonder. Mesopotamia taught us to build from mud and ambition. Egypt showed how stone could touch eternity. Greece fused form with philosophy. Rome taught permanence. China balance. The Maya cosmic rhythm. Persia flow. The Khmer harmony. Their methods differed. Their materials changed, but their impulse was shared. The need to solve, shape, elevate, and endure. The ingenuity of the Khmer people wasn't isolated to Angkor. Beyond the grand temples and expansive reservoirs lay a deeper philosophy, a civilization built on resilience, adaptability, and reverence for balance. Their cities were layered with intention. Each street, moat, and mound served not just a functional purpose, but a spiritual one as well. The alignment of structures with celestial bodies echoed a desire to anchor daily life to the cosmos. Every architectural line had a symbolic weight, a gesture toward the heavens or a nod to the earth. As dawn rose over Angkor Thom, the city would slowly come alive. Roosters would crow from palm-thatched huts. Monks would chant through corridors lined with elephant statues, and workers would unroll baskets of rice to dry in the golden light. Above it all, the towers of the Bayon Temple gazed out in all directions, faces carved into stone, serene and eternal. These were more than just sculptures. They were watchful guardians, reminders that every stone laid had meaning. The Khmer didn't merely survive in a difficult landscape. They flourished because they listened to it. They studied the seasons, understood the ebb and flow of water, and created a system that allowed their culture to blossom. But even mighty Angkor would eventually be reclaimed by jungle. The precise reasons still debated: war, drought, political upheaval. And yet, their legacy lived on in their waterways, their art, and the intricate relationships they built with nature. Elsewhere, across the oceans and high mountain valleys, another empire harnessed stone and slope to write its story, the Inca. Without a written language, the Inca left behind no books, but they built a civilization that spoke volumes in granite. High in the Andes, where the air thins and the earth trembles, they carved terraces into mountainsides. These terraces weren't only agricultural marvels, they were engineering feats. They stabilized slopes, preserved soil, and cleverly managed rainwater, preventing landslides while expanding the empire's ability to grow crops. Machu Picchu, their jewel among the clouds, is a breathtaking example. Nestled between two peaks, the city seems to float in mist. Yet beneath its beauty lies a sophisticated infrastructure. Every house, every wall, every stairway was placed with precision. Stones were cut and fitted without mortar so tightly that even a blade cannot pass between them. This dry stone technique was not only artistic, it was seismic. In a region prone to earthquakes, these walls absorbed tremors and shifted slightly without collapsing. Even the city's water system was engineered with care. Spring water was channeled through stone-lined aqueducts, feeding fountains throughout the settlement. Excess water was routed through drainage systems still functional today. The Inca didn't dominate nature, they learned to coexist with it, building into the landscape, not over it. From Cusco to Quito, their roads and suspension bridges stitched together the Andes. They used quipu and ceramic pipelines. These channels collected seasonal rains and diverted flash floods into reservoirs, sustaining thousands of residents year-round. Water was stored, cooled, and even delivered to private homes and public fountains. In Petra, water was wealth, and engineering was survival. Through narrow canyons known as SIQ, carved channels hug the walls, still visible today. They carried water past inscriptions, carvings, and towering facades like the treasury and the monastery, structures cut directly from the living rock, rising like echoes from the past. At night, Petra would have glowed with oil lamps. Merchants from Arabia, Rome, and India would exchange goods and stories, and the silence of the desert would settle like velvet. These were not people fighting the land. They danced with it, and their elegance still whispers through stone. Northward, across sea and mountain, another marvel emerges: Byzantine engineering. Often overshadowed by the grandeur of Rome, the Byzantine Empire fused Roman knowledge with Eastern vision. Its greatest testament, the Hagia Sophia. Built in the 6th century under Emperor Justinian, the Hagia Sophia was not just a church. It was an attempt to bridge heaven and earth. Its dome, seemingly weightless, floated above a forest of columns, lit by windows that made it shimmer like the sky itself. Engineers Anthemius and Isidore pioneered techniques never seen before, crafting pendentives, curved triangles that allowed a circular dome to rest on a square base. This wasn't just structural, it was spiritual. Light became a medium. Space was bent into form. The building breathed with divine proportion. And outside, the Byzantines expanded aqueducts, built city walls that withstood sieges for centuries, and preserved ancient texts that would later ignite the Renaissance. They connected worlds, East and West, ancient and modern, through architecture, even farther north, among frozen fjords and volcanic plains. The Norse people built with timber, turf, and tenacity. Their stave churches, with steep gables and dragon-headed carvings, were marvels of woodwork. Crafted from pine and oak, bound with wooden pegs, these structures withstood centuries of storms. In Iceland, they channeled hot springs into communal baths, long before modern spas. They constructed turf houses that used grass, mud, and stone to insulate against Arctic winds. These were homes that breathed with the land, warm, quiet, and built for the long, dark winters. Across the globe, ancient Japan refined elegance into engineering. In Kyoto and Nara, temples rose not for conquest, but for contemplation. Crafted from cedar and cypress, their beams and eaves interlocked without nails. The result? Earthquake-resistant structures that swayed like trees instead of cracking. The 5-story pagoda of Horyuji, built in the 7th century, still stands today. At its heart is a single central pillar, suspended but not touching the ground. During tremors, the floors move independently, diffusing shock, a harmony of architecture and earth. Japanese carpenters, or miyadaiku, passed down knowledge through practice, not paper. They understood wind, rain, and time. Even the tea house, small, simple, precise, was a reflection of spatial genius. Every mat, doorframe, and window was considered. Nothing wasted. Everything intentional. In these spaces, time slows. The scent of wood mingles with incense. Tatami mats soften the silence. The engineering disappears, and all that remains is peace. As you drift further, let the echoes of these marvels lull you. Each stone placed by calloused hands, each timber carved with purpose, each dome, each arch, each stairway etched with the dreams of countless generations. These wonders were not built by kings alone, but by anonymous artisans, laborers, and thinkers, each playing a part in a story that continues still. Their hands shaped the world so ours could explore it. And their lessons, if we choose to hear them, speak of unity with nature, of reverence for balance, of courage in vision. Among the dense forests and sprawling rivers of sub-Saharan Africa, innovation took on many forms, crafted in wood, woven into walls, etched into earth. The ancient city of Great Zimbabwe stands as a silent testament to a powerful civilization that flourished between the 11th and 15th centuries. Without mortar, using only precisely carved granite blocks, the people of Great Zimbabwe constructed towering walls and enclosures that still stand today. The great enclosures' walls, some reaching over 30 feet in height, curve and snake in rhythmic patterns. The architecture is not rigid, but fluid, echoing the forms of the land around it. This was a design philosophy that embraced nature's contours instead of imposing upon them. Their ingenuity extended to urban layout. Residences were arranged with careful zoning, areas designated for social, ritual, and domestic functions. Soapstone birds, finely carved and perched atop monoliths, reveal an artistic and possibly spiritual reverence. These symbols likely represented kingship, ancestors, or the bridge between the physical and the divine. Further west, the Kingdom of Benin built massive earthworks that spanned over 10,000 miles. The Benin walls, ramparts, moats, and ditches formed one of the largest human-made earthworks ever constructed. Using simple tools and collective labor, the people created complex defensive systems that also defined space and organized life. In the north, ancient Morocco became home to medinas, densely packed urban centers surrounded by high walls and laced with winding streets. These cities, like Fez and Marrakesh, included sophisticated water channels, gardens, and marketplaces. The sakia, or water wheel, turned by animals, lifted water from underground and channeled it into homes and fountains. Roofs sloped to funnel rainwater into cisterns. Courtyards offered cool air and shaded rest. In the Islamic Golden Age, knowledge flowed freely through the world. Cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba became centers of learning and architectural advancement. In Cordoba, the Great Mosque was a masterpiece of arches layered upon arches, light filtering through columns like rays through a forest. Islamic engineers advanced the art of water management. The Noria, a large water wheel powered by a river current, lifted water into aqueducts. In the desert, engineers built wind towers similar to the Persian badgirs, funneling air downward to cool homes naturally. Books were written on hydrodynamics, optics, and mechanical devices. The 13th century polymath Al-Jazari designed intricate water clocks, automata, and pumps, all powered by gears, weights, and flow. His illustrated manuscripts preserved designs that would later inspire the gears of the industrial world. Meanwhile, in India, the step wells, known as baolis or valves, transformed necessity into artistry. In arid regions, water was scarce, so engineers dug deep wells with descending staircases that allowed access to the water table year-round. These step wells, carved in stone, were adorned with columns, sculptures, and symmetrical geometry. Rani Ki Vav in Gujarat is one of the most beautiful. Built in the 11th century, it extends 7 stories underground, with over 1,000 intricately carved sculptures adorning its walls. Each descent brought cooler air, shade, and spiritual reflection, a fusion of engineering and meditation. Temples, too, like those in Khajuraho or Hampi, were not only religious centers, but structural wonders. Carved from granite or sandstone, their towers reached skyward, while their bases anchored in detailed depictions of mythology, nature, and life. The temples of Kailasa in Ellora were not built stone by stone. They were carved downward from a single rock, revealing entire complexes sculpted out of the mountain itself. These were not monuments of excess. They were expressions of balance, devotion, and collective skill. Back in Southeast Asia, the island of Java saw the rise of Borobudur, a Buddhist temple built in the 9th century. Designed as a mandala in 3 dimensions, it consists of 9 stacked platforms crowned by a central dome. As pilgrims ascend, they pass hundreds of Buddha statues and panels depicting the journey to enlightenment. Each stone was laid without mortar, each statue placed with intent when viewed from above. Borobudur resembles a cosmic diagram, a map of the universe etched in lava stone. Its drainage system, still functional, channels monsoon rains away through hidden spouts and gutters, preserving its form. In this land of volcanoes and tremors, builders worked with the Earth's volatility, not against it. They learned the patterns of wind, the rhythm of rain, the secrets of the soil. In the Pacific, on the tiny island of Nan Madol, another wonder emerged. Built on coral reefs and constructed from massive basalt columns transported over water. This was a ceremonial complex of 100 artificial islets connected by canals. It is sometimes called the Venice of the Pacific. How the people of Pompeii moved these massive stones, some weighing several tons, remains a mystery. There were no cranes, no wheels, only the tides, rafts, and perhaps an understanding of balance and buoyancy lost to time. In Easter Island, the Moai, stone heads with solemn expressions, stand sentinel along the coast. Some suggest they were moved upright across miles using a walking technique, rocking the stones forward like enormous pendulums. If true, it was not brute force that placed them, but harmony, patience, and rhythm. From these remote islands to the shores of the Mediterranean, a pattern emerges. Ancient peoples, across time and continent, used the materials at hand with wisdom and restraint. They observed the stars, the seasons, the soil. They listened to the wind, to the earth, to the whispers of intuition passed down through generations. They were not building for profit, not for prestige, but for connection to the divine, to each other, to the future. This is what makes these ancient engineering marvels more than just history. They are lessons. To build not merely high, but with purpose. To consider the land, not just conquer it. To use technology not to dominate, but to harmonize. Throughout the ancient world, what distinguished civilizations was not merely what they built, but how they built it. The engineering marvels of the past were as much about the tools and materials used as the vision behind them. In this part, we delve into the materials, techniques, and innovations that enabled ancient wonders to rise and endure. Materials of antiquity. Ancient builders did not have the luxury of modern steel, plastics, or reinforced concrete. Instead, they relied on what nature provided: stone, wood, mud, clay, metals, and in certain regions, even bone or ice. Stone was the material of eternity, used in Egypt, Greece, Rome, India, and Mesoamerica. Its durability made it ideal for temples, tombs, fortresses, and monumental sculptures. Different regions favored different kinds. Limestone in Egypt, marble in Greece, basalt in Mesoamerica, and sandstone in India. Stone was quarried, transported, often over great distances, and shaped using copper, bronze, or iron tools, along with abrasives like sand. Mud brick was the material of the people. It was used extensively in Mesopotamia, Persia, and parts of North Africa. Made by mixing mud with straw and drying it in the sun, these bricks were lightweight, easy to produce, and perfect for homes, city walls, and ziggurats. However, they eroded easily in rain, which is why fewer mud brick structures survive today. Wood was used widely, though it has not endured as well through time. In ancient China, Japan, Northern Europe, and pre-Columbian North America, timber was a primary material for housing and religious buildings. Builders used mortise and tenon joints, dowels, and even bark-based resins to bind and waterproof wooden structures. Metals such as copper, bronze, iron, and gold were used for tools, reinforcement, ornamentation, and utility. Bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, was used by the Egyptians, Greeks, and Chinese to cast tools and weapons. Iron tools began appearing widely in the first millennium BCE, allowing deeper quarrying and more durable chiseling. Clay and ceramics were essential in nearly all civilizations for bricks, pipes, tiles, and vessels. In regions like the Indus Valley, baked bricks were a major structural component. Ceramic water pipes were used by the Minoans and, later, the Romans. In China, ceramic molds and glazes advanced to a high level, with kilns firing at temperatures above 1,000 degrees. Techniques and innovations: quarrying and transporting. Stone. Transporting massive stones was one of the most daunting engineering challenges. In Egypt, large limestone blocks for the pyramids were dragged on sleds across leveled roads. Wetting the sand ahead of the sled reduced friction. In Rome, roads were often built or modified specifically to support the movement of materials, with carts, oxen, and teams of workers coordinating logistics. In Easter Island, Moai statues, each weighing several tons, were moved miles without wheels. The prevailing theory today is that teams of workers walked the statues forward using a rope and swaying technique, which involved tilting and rocking them from side to side. Joining and binding. Before industrial adhesives and nails, ancient builders relied on intelligent joinery. The Greeks and Romans used clamps, dowels, and dovetail joints in stone. In Japan and China, interlocking wooden joints were perfected, some strong enough to withstand earthquakes without nails or screws. Mortar was another major advancement. The Romans developed pozzolanic concrete, mixing volcanic ash with lime and water. This allowed them to build underwater, reinforce harbors, and create forms like the Pantheon's dome. Unlike modern concrete, Roman concrete often became stronger with age. Measuring and leveling engineering requires precision, and ancient civilizations devised their own instruments. The Egyptians used plumb bobs, levels, and squares. They aligned pyramids with true north using the stars, particularly the pole star of the time, Thuban. Water levels, simple tools using water-filled tubes, ensured horizontal alignment. The Romans used the chorobates, a type of level with notches and a water trough, to ensure Aqueducts had the right gradient, steep enough to maintain flow, but shallow enough to prevent erosion. Lifting and hoisting. Raising heavy materials required cranes, pulleys, and levers. The Greeks used compound pulleys and capstans, enabling the lifting of heavy column drums. The Romans took this further, developing treadwheel cranes, giant wooden wheels powered by workers walking inside them, multiplying lifting force. Counterweight systems and inclined ramps were common for raising stones. In Egypt, massive ramps of mud brick and sand allowed pyramid blocks to be moved upward gradually. Water management. Water was both a gift and a threat. Civilizations that mastered water management flourished. The Indus Valley civilization used covered drains, manholes, and wastewater systems. Rome's aqueducts, driven by gravity alone, delivered millions of gallons per day to cities via bridges, tunnels, and siphons. In Persia, the Qanat system carried water through gently sloped underground tunnels, preventing evaporation. In the Andes, the Inca built stepped canals and fountains, some of which still function today. Reservoirs like the Borays of Angkor or the cisterns beneath Constantinople ensured fresh water year-round. Heating and cooling comfort was not overlooked. The Romans developed hypercaust systems, where hot air from furnaces flowed beneath floors and through walls, warming villas and public baths. In hot climates, wind towers and evaporative cooling provided relief. In ancient Iran and Egypt, air was funneled over water pools, then directed indoors, cooling homes passively. Mechanical devices, mechanical ingenuity extended beyond construction. The Greeks and Chinese developed automata, mechanical devices powered by water, weights, or gears. Al-Jazari's 13th century book described dozens of inventions, including programmable automata, water clocks, and gear-driven pumps. Greek engineer Hero of Alexandria invented a primitive steam engine, the eolipile, and described siphons, fire engines, and even vending machines. These devices were not toys. They demonstrated deep understanding of physics, hydraulics, and motion. Though not industrialized, they laid groundwork for future mechanical revolutions. Urban planning. Ancient cities were not chaotic. Many were meticulously planned. Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa featured grid-based layouts, public baths, and uniform housing. Roman cities followed the Cardo and Decumanus plan, main roads intersecting at right angles, leading to forums and amphitheaters. Mesoamerican cities oriented their pyramids and plazas to solstices and equinoxes, blending astronomy with architecture. Angkor was a hydraulic city, its layout dependent on water flow, reservoirs, and ritual geometry. Safety and durability. Durability was key. Builders often over-engineered structures. The Great Pyramid's base was leveled to within a few centimeters, and its internal stones protected the burial chamber from collapse. In Japan, Temples were built to flex, not break, during earthquakes. In Rome, foundations were sunk deep, and buildings like the Colosseum used layered materials, concrete, tuff, and brick, for strength and flexibility. In every case, ancient engineers understood their environment and built to endure it. One of the defining achievements of ancient engineering wasn't what was built in cities, but what was built between them. Roads, bridges, and communication systems allowed empires to expand, trade to flourish, and ideas to spread. The Roman road system was the most extensive of the ancient world, with over 250,000 miles of roads, 50,000 of them paved, built in layers, large stones, gravel, sand, and topped with stone slabs. These roads were durable and remarkably straight. Military legions, merchants, and messengers could travel from one end of the empire to the other swiftly and safely. Bridges were equally vital. Roman engineers constructed stone arch bridges, some of which still stand today. The Alcantara Bridge in Spain, built nearly 2,000 years ago, remains intact, bearing inscriptions dedicating it to Emperor Trajan. In the Incan Empire, roads and bridges connected mountain valleys and coastal plains. Their Capac Yan, or Royal Road, extended for thousands of miles across rugged terrain. To span rivers and gorges, the Inca built rope suspension bridges made of woven grass, light, flexible, and renewed regularly by local communities. The Silk Road, a vast network of trade routes, connected east and west. Though not a single road, it was supported by caravanserais, rest stops providing water, shelter, and security, engineered to support long-distance travel across deserts and mountains. These systems weren't just about transport. They were about integration, uniting distant provinces, enabling trade, sharing culture, and maintaining control. Infrastructure was the invisible architecture of empire. As you close your eyes, picture travelers crossing highland bridges, Roman roads winding through cypress groves, and desert caravans resting beneath stars. Silent proof of an ancient world in motion. In the ancient world, the line between science, mathematics, and spirituality was not a line at all. It was a continuum. To build was not simply to assemble materials, but to mirror the heavens, to reflect divine order, and to give form to belief. Sacred geometry, specific shapes, proportions, and alignments thought to resonate with cosmic harmony guided much of the world's most enduring architecture. The belief was simple yet profound. Numbers and shapes were not human inventions but discoveries. They revealed a universal truth woven into the fabric of existence. Circles represented eternity, squares stood for order, triangles symbolized strength, and the golden ratio, the elegant proportion of 1 to 1.618, was seen as a bridge between mathematics and aesthetics, chaos and harmony. In ancient Egypt, The geometry of the pyramids was not arbitrary. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built over 4,500 years ago, aligns with extraordinary precision to the cardinal directions: true north, south, east, and west. The base forms a nearly perfect square, and the slope of its sides forms an angle remarkably close to the golden ratio. Scholars still debate whether this was intentional or coincidental, but the outcome is undeniable. A structure so geometrically refined that it has withstood time, earthquakes, and the elements. But the sacred geometry of Egypt went beyond the pyramids. Temples like those at Karnak and
Luxor were aligned with solstices and equinoxes. On certain days, sunlight would pierce through the temple halls, illuminating statues of gods in their innermost sanctuaries. These alignments were not decorative. They were rituals carved in stone, moments when the divine and the terrestrial touched. The Greeks took these ideas and developed them further. Influenced by Pythagoras, who believed that numbers were the essence of all things, they brought mathematical clarity into architectural beauty. The Parthenon, completed in the 5th century BCE, appears deceptively simple, but its every element is finely tuned to mathematical ideals. The spacing of its columns, the curve of its base, the proportions of its height to width, all draw upon geometric ratios like the golden mean. More than symmetry, the Greeks pursued harmony, a sense that architecture could resonate with the human spirit, much like music. Just as a lyre string vibrates at specific intervals to create pleasing sound, so too could columns and spaces be tuned to create pleasing sight. Their amphitheaters were not just social venues, they were acoustic masterpieces, shaped into half circles that amplified the spoken word without need for technology. In India, the principles of sacred geometry were codified in ancient texts like the Vastu Shastra and Shilpa Shastra, manuals that guided temple architecture. These texts prescribed the orientation of buildings, the proportions of rooms, the dimensions of shrines, and even the flow of energy through a space. Temples were not only places of worship, they were cosmograms, architectural mandalas that embodied the universe itself. At the center was the Garbhagriha, the womb chamber, representing the point of divine creation. Around it, layers of halls and courtyards unfolded, much like the layers of consciousness or the cosmos. The entire layout often aligned with celestial patterns, sunrises, lunar phases, and planetary positions. Take the Konark Sun Temple in Odisha. Its structure resembles a chariot for the sun god Surya, with 24 wheels representing the hours of the day, pulled by stone horses. The temple's orientation is such that the first rays of the morning sun would illuminate the sanctum. It's not only geometry, it's astronomy, philosophy, and devotion all in one. In Mesoamerica, sacred geometry took the form of stepped pyramids and axial plazas, aligned with celestial movements. The ancient city of Teotihuacan, in present-day Mexico,
was laid out on a grand grid, with the Avenue of the Dead running north-south, and the Pyramid of the Sun oriented to match the setting sun on certain key dates. The Maya, particularly, were master astronomers and mathematicians. Their pyramids, like El Castillo at Chichen Itza, weren't just tombs or temples, they were calendars. On the equinoxes, shadows fall in such a way as to create the illusion of a serpent slithering down the staircase, a visual expression of the descent of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god. These builders did not simply respond to nature, they communicated with it, encoded it, mirrored it in stone and structure. In China, feng shui was the art and science of aligning human dwellings with the energy flows of the earth, or qi. Sacred geometry in Chinese architecture is subtler but equally profound. The Forbidden City in Beijing, for example, was built with a layout adhering to strict axial symmetry, reflecting harmony with the cosmos. Structures were positioned to capture auspicious energy, with the emperor's throne always placed in the most harmonically potent location. Even in Gothic Europe, long after the classical world had faded, sacred geometry endured. Cathedrals like Notre Dame and Chartres were built with geometrical ratios passed down from ancient sources. Rose windows, nave proportions, and even the ground plans of these cathedrals echo circles, squares, and golden spirals. Builders use templates, compasses, and an intuitive sense of beauty rooted in geometry to guide their hands. Why did they do this? Because they believed the universe itself was built on these patterns. The spiral of a galaxy, the curve of a seashell, the petals of a flower, all followed mathematical laws. By aligning their structures with these forms, ancient architects hoped to invoke order, attract harmony, and honor creation. In this worldview, engineering was a sacred act. To draw a circle was to symbolize the infinite. To carve a square was to anchor the human to the divine. To build was to participate in the unfolding story of the universe. And so, across continents and centuries, we find the same motifs repeated: spirals, mandalas, stars, lattices. From the mosques of Samarkand to the pagodas of Kyoto, from Aztec temples to Celtic stone circles, humans returned again and again to these sacred shapes, not because they were simple, but because they were timeless. As you relax now, imagine a column rising from sacred ground, its proportions echoing the golden mean. Visualize the geometry of a spiral staircase, climbing upward into a dome bathed in light. Picture the labyrinth carved into a temple floor, inviting the seeker not outward, but inward. These were not merely designs, they were invitations to walk a spiritual path, to contemplate harmony, to feel, in some small way, the shape of the infinite. When we admire the marvels of ancient engineering, the towering pyramids, the massive walls, the sweeping aqueducts, it's easy to focus on the final result, on the stones and structures that have survived the centuries. But just as awe-inspiring is the human story behind these achievements, the laborers, architects, artisans, and planners who gave their energy, time, and lives to shape the world we now inherit. Contrary to popular belief, not all ancient construction was driven by slavery. In many civilizations, engineering was a communal, even sacred act. In ancient Egypt, it's often assumed the pyramids were built by slaves. But modern archaeology tells a more complex and respectful story. Evidence from workers' villages near the pyramids, such as Hayt el-Ghurab, shows that laborers were skilled craftsmen who lived in organized housing, received regular rations, and were even buried near the sites they helped build. These were proud specialists, masons, carpenters, stone haulers, participating in what may have been a national religious endeavor. To help construct a pyramid was to honor the gods and serve the afterlife of the pharaoh. In imperial Rome, construction was more institutional. The state employed vast teams of laborers, free citizens, enslaved people, and soldiers to build roads, aqueducts, and monuments. The Roman legions, especially in frontier regions, often doubled as engineers. They built fortresses, bridges, and roads, which enabled not only military movement, but also civilian life. Engineering and military organization went hand in hand. Rome's corvée labor system required citizens in conquered territories to contribute labor instead of taxes. While demanding, this often led to the rapid construction of critical infrastructure, roads that linked distant provinces, aqueducts that brought water to new cities, and public baths that helped integrate Roman culture. In ancient China, massive infrastructure projects like the Great Wall or the Grand Canal required coordinated state labor. Some were built under harsh conditions, with prison labor and military conscription. Others were communal efforts, with regions contributing workers as part of tax obligations. Engineers, or gong chengshi, worked alongside laborers, often acting as both supervisors and technicians. Knowledge was passed down through generations of craftsmen, each trained not only in technical skill, but in the philosophy of harmonious design. In pre-Columbian America, labor had a communal and often spiritual dimension. In the Incan Empire, the meter system organized collective work on state projects, including roads, terraces, and fortresses. This was not slavery. It was a form of structured reciprocity. Communities contributed labor in exchange for protection, infrastructure, and redistribution of goods. The Incas carefully recorded labor obligations using quipus, knot-based recording tools, and even provided meals and lodging to workers. In Angkor, the Khmer Empire relied on large coordinated labor forces to construct reservoirs. And temples. Temples like Angkor Wat may have required tens of thousands of workers over decades. Inscriptions describe teams of stonemasons, dancers, scribes, cooks, and guards, all contributing to the temple's daily life and ongoing construction. But not all labor was peaceful. In empires where power was centralized and oppressive, massive projects were often imposed with little regard for human cost. In Assyria, royal inscriptions brag about the forced relocation of entire populations to build new capitals. In Babylon, vast ziggurats rose under regimes that treated workers harshly. Despite these harsh realities, the very complexity of these projects required deep planning, specialization, and interdependence. Ancient engineers organized vast supply chains, stone quarries, timber forests, metal forges, and managed them without modern logistics. They established codes of conduct, like the Code of Hammurabi, which included detailed laws about construction quality, liability, and compensation. Across cultures, construction sites became schools of skill. Apprentices learned from masters, observing techniques passed on not through writing, but through patient hands-on learning. Knowledge lived in calloused fingers, in gestures honed by years of precision. And then there were the artisans, stonemasons who carved perfect arches without mortar, metal workers who forged bronze tools sharp enough to sculpt granite, painters, mosaicists, and tilers who turned walls into stories. These individuals rarely appear in historical texts, but they are visible in the details. The chisel marks on a column, the subtle curve of a lintel, the seamless fit of two stones cut centuries before modern machinery. Their fingerprints remain, even if their names are lost. And beyond the builders stood the planners, the architects and engineers who understood mathematics, hydraulics, and astronomy, who could translate a vision into drawings, and those drawings into actions. Figures like Imhotep, architect of Egypt's first pyramid, like Vitruvius, the Roman engineer whose principles influence Renaissance architecture, like Yu the Great, the legendary Chinese figure credited with controlling floods through engineering. But for every famous name, there were thousands whose contributions made these achievements possible. Ordinary people with extraordinary endurance. As we close this section, consider not only the monuments, but the hands that made them, the sweat, the collaboration, the centuries of shared knowledge. These wonders were not built by magic. They were built by effort, sacrifice, coordination, and belief. Before satellites, pumps, and computer models, ancient engineers had to understand the environment intimately. Their success depended not on bending nature to their will, but learning to work with it. Environmental engineering, in the ancient sense, was about adaptation, balance, and sustainability. In Mesopotamia, the birthplace of urban civilization, water was both life and danger. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers brought fertile soil, but also unpredictable floods. To manage this, the Sumerians developed canals, levees, and reservoirs. Their cities were laced with irrigation channels that transformed arid plains into productive farmland. They invented early sluice gates to control flow and settling basins to remove sediment before water reached the fields. The challenge was maintaining balance. Over time, poor drainage and over-irrigation caused salinization, degrading the soil. The slow collapse of some Mesopotamian cities may have stemmed from environmental mismanagement, a warning from history about the cost of unsustainable practices. The Indus Valley Civilization, flourishing around 2600 BC, was equally advanced. In cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, engineers created a standardized grid layout with baked brick drains along every street. Homes were connected to sewage systems and private wells. Public granaries were built with ventilation to protect stored grain from moisture and pests. This wasn't just urban planning, it was public health. In the Nile Valley, Egypt's engineers worked with predictable seasonal floods. They constructed
basins to hold the inundation, allowing silt-rich water to spread over fields gradually. This basin irrigation system preserved soil fertility for millennia. They even developed nilometers, stone columns with markings to measure the river's rise, allowing priests and administrators to predict harvests and adjust taxes accordingly. Across the ocean, Mayan engineers faced a different challenge: dense jungle and scarce surface water. They dug chultuns, bottle-shaped underground cisterns, to store rainwater. In places like Tikal, massive reservoirs were lined with clay and sand to prevent seepage and filtration. These cisterns were critical for survival during dry seasons. Their agriculture was equally adapted. In swampy lowlands, the Maya created raised fields with canals that provided both drainage and fish. In highland areas, they carved terraces into slopes to prevent erosion and capture water. Their entire civilization was an exercise in environmental balance until cycles of drought and overpopulation tipped the scale. In Andean South America, the Inca faced steep mountains and variable climates. Their solution: highly sophisticated agricultural terraces built with stone retaining walls that prevented erosion and created microclimates. These terraces included layers of gravel, sand, and topsoil for drainage and insulation. Paired with canals and fountains, they created self-regulating systems that sustained entire communities. To store food, the Inca built kolkars, or storage silos, in cool, dry locations. Some were designed with ventilation systems that kept food fresh for years, a key component of their ability to support large armies and populations. In the desert landscapes of Persia, the Qanat system, underground tunnels that transported water from aquifers to cities and fields, demonstrates a profound understanding of hydrology. These channels extended for kilometers, with vertical shafts dug at intervals to allow access and ventilation. By building below the surface, they prevented evaporation, making agriculture possible in regions with virtually no rainfall. In Arabian and North African cities, architecture became environmental engineering. Thick walls, small windows, and courtyards with pools created passive cooling. Wind catchers, or badgers, captured breezes and funneled them into homes. Even city layouts maximized shade and airflow. Buildings were arranged to create narrow alleys that funneled cool air and shielded from direct sun. China, too, had ancient strategies for dealing with environmental variability. Large-scale flood control projects, such as those attributed to the mythical Yu the Great, became national priorities. Dikes, levees, and canal networks were constructed to tame rivers like the Yellow and Yangtze. Rice paddies, terraced hillsides, and aquaculture systems reflected a deep integration of ecology and agriculture. Across all these cultures, a common theme emerges. Engineering was about listening. These ancient builders observed, tested, and responded to their environments with solutions that were elegant, efficient, and often low impact. As we reflect in silence, imagine the rhythm of water in a Mayan reservoir, the cool shade of a Persian courtyard, the slow drip of an Incan canal winding down a mountain. These were not machines, they were living systems, shaped by the hands and minds of people in tune with the earth. Beyond agriculture and irrigation, ancient civilizations approached entire cities as ecosystems, carefully managing resources, space, airflow, and sanitation to ensure sustainable urban life. What they achieved without electricity, fossil fuels, or modern technology remains astonishing. In ancient Greece, particularly in cities like Athens and Delphi, planners capitalized on natural topography. Houses were built to maximize sunlight in winter and shade in summer, a concept known as passive solar design. Public spaces like agoras and theaters were placed to catch prevailing breezes and reduce heat. Even in sacred spaces, such as the oracle site at Delphi, the architecture took advantage of wind currents and mountain springs to create spaces that felt both mystical and cool. The Tats, Romans, masters of infrastructure, integrated nature into every aspect of urban life. Their aqueducts didn't just deliver drinking water, they supplied public fountains, baths, gardens, and sewage systems. In places like Pompeii, homes had impluviums, central basins to collect rainwater, while underground cisterns stored water for dry seasons. Their cities were punctuated by green spaces, such as peristyle gardens,
which helped manage temperature and improved air quality. Rome's Cloaca Maxima, one of the world's earliest sewage systems, diverted waste out of the city and into the Tiber River. While rudimentary by today's standards, it reflected a commitment to cleanliness and public health rarely seen in contemporary civilizations. In sub-Saharan Africa, cities like Timbuktu and Jenny were built with adobe, a mixture of mud, straw, and sometimes cow dung. These materials had low thermal conductivity, meaning they kept buildings cool during the day and retained warmth at night. The architecture featured thick walls, narrow alleys, and flat roofs that captured water and minimized solar exposure. Annual festivals in Jenny are still held to repair the Great Mosque, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, through a communal replastering event. This isn't just maintenance, it's ecological ritual, blending culture, sustainability, and architecture into one act. In the Americas, cities like Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, were built on lakes. Engineers constructed chinampas, floating gardens, by layering mud and vegetation on rafts anchored with willow trees. These agricultural platforms were highly productive and naturally irrigated by surrounding water. Walkways and canals crisscrossed the city, facilitating transportation and controlling flooding. The city was also zoned. Markets, temples, gardens, and homes carefully distributed to balance function and flow. Ancient Sri Lanka developed complex hydraulic civilizations, especially in the kingdom of Anuradhapura. Engineers built massive tanks, artificial lakes that collected rainwater and runoff. These reservoirs, connected by canals, fed rice paddies and created habitats for birds and fish. The systems included sluices to regulate water levels and spillways to prevent overflow. This was not just engineering, it was environmental harmony. These tanks cooled the surrounding air, supported biodiversity, and created resilience against drought. In Japan, Satoyama landscapes, rural ecosystems co-managed by humans, combined forests, rice fields, streams, and villages. Ancient builders placed homes near woodlands but far enough from floodplains. They built terraces to prevent erosion, dug irrigation ditches by hand, and left wild buffers around settlements to support pollinators and wildlife. Their philosophy: live within the system, not outside of it. All these examples share a common principle: respect for limits. Ancient engineers worked with wind and gravity, not against them. They built cities that breathed with the seasons. They created systems that required human stewardship, encouraging community participation and ecological awareness. There's a lesson in this. These ancient approaches, simple, elegant, integrated, offer models for our modern world. In an age of climate change and urban sprawl, we may find solutions by looking backward, by remembering how to listen to the earth. As you rest deeper now, Imagine an ancient city at dusk. The soft splash of water in a stone basin, the flicker of torchlight against earthen walls, the silence of a system that works because it is part of the land, not apart from it. As the final light of ancient day fades into the dusk of memory, we pause to reflect, not only on what was built, but on what remains. Engineering in the ancient world was not just a trade or technique. It was a worldview, a system of thought, a philosophy inscribed in earth and stone. Across continents and millennia, humanity pursued a similar goal: to understand, to shape, and to endure. From the Nile to the Andes, from the Yellow River to the Tiber, ancient engineers worked not to dominate nature, but to live in dialogue with it. Many of their creations still stand, not by accident, but by design. They were built to last because they were built to belong. Consider the Pantheon in Rome. Its dome, still the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world, rises over 142 feet, perfectly balanced. The oculus at its peak is open to the sky, allowing light and rain to enter, connecting the sacred space to the heavens. This was engineering not just for shelter, but for experience. A place where architecture meets astronomy and time itself becomes part of the structure. Or the Great Wall of China, winding across thousands of miles of rugged terrain, built not just for defense, but as a unifying thread linking regions, peoples, dynasties. It's a feat of logistics, terrain adaptation, and collective effort on a scale unmatched. The Inca trail system, built without wheels or written maps, still guides trekkers through the Andes. Its stones are worn, its paths narrowed, but its presence is alive. Each step retraces the ingenuity of people who saw mountains not as obstacles, but as homes. And then there's Petra, the city carved from rose-red stone. Hidden in Jordan's desert cliffs, its facades rise like frozen waves, etched by hand. Engineers there mastered water control in an unforgiving climate, carving cisterns, dams and channels into solid rock. They turned stone into sanctuary. These are not relics. They are teachers. They teach us that engineering is not a single act, but a relationship. It's a response to need, yes, but also to place, to belief, and to time. Ancient builders understood the arc of centuries. They designed with future generations in mind. They worked with cycles, the flood, the drought, the harvest, the solstice, not against them. In many ways, their approach was more sustainable than ours today. They used local materials, minimized waste, and integrated their work into the landscape. They valued function, but also symbolism, harmony, and meaning. Their buildings didn't just stand, they spoke. They whispered stories of gods and ancestors. They mirrored stars and told time. They measured the seasons and marked the sacred. And perhaps most importantly, they brought people together. Public baths, markets, temples, and roads were more than infrastructure. They were social glue, fostering connection, identity, and continuity. Even in their failures, we find wisdom. The collapse of cities like Mohenjo-Daro, Angkor, or certain Mayan centers reminds us of fragility. Droughts, soil depletion, and overextension had consequences. These weren't just natural disasters. They were moments where the relationship between people and environment grew strained. And so their ruins become lessons. Balance is not optional. Sustainability is not a modern invention. It is an ancient necessity. The tools they used were simple. The math was sometimes rudimentary, but the results, vast domes, miles of aqueducts, temples aligned to stars, defy the assumption that we are inherently more advanced. In many ways, they achieved more with less. So what endures? Not just the stone, but the spirit. The engineering of the past endures in how we think about space, design, and resilience. In our continued fascination with proportion, balance, and the elegance of nature. It endures in the blueprints of Gothic cathedrals and Islamic gardens, in the arches of modern bridges and the layout of cities. Even in our technologies, in hydraulics, gears, domes, and thermal control, we echo ideas born thousands of years ago. It endures in the questions we still ask. How can we build wisely? How can we live in harmony with the world around us? How can we leave something behind, not as a burden, but as a gift? Perhaps that is the truest measure of ancient engineering, not what it accomplished, but what it still inspires. As you rest now, let your thoughts drift over a silent aqueduct under moonlight, a pyramid casting its morning shadow, a stone path lost in jungle moss, the slow, steady rhythm of ancient tools shaping something meant to last. And know this, you too are part of that legacy, to create, to solve, to build with purpose. This is one of the oldest human instincts, one that, like those monuments of old, still stands quietly within you.